Hello and welcome back to Aki Trades. Before we begin, I just want to do the usual trading video disclaimer. This video is for informational purposes only. These are not recommendations to buy, sell or hold any type of security, and I may hold positions in some of the equities mentioned. Know your own time frame and risk tolerance. Alright, so yesterday I was sitting around and thinking about options, and I realized that I kind of forgot some of the basics, how options work. And I thought I should spend some time today to do a refresher, to refresh my memory. And I got into options quite recently, and I was always kind of interested in how it works. And I to be honest, I never really got it, because it can be quite kind of tricky to understand in the beginning. So I spent some time a few months ago over my Christmas break and watched a lot of stuff and read a lot of stuff to kind of understand how options work. And then I talked to a friend of mine who's also into kind of investing and trading, and I told him that I was looking into option, and he got really interested and he wanted me to kind of show him. So kind of typical laziness on my part, I kind of sent him a bunch of videos, watch these 5 hours of videos and I'm sure you get it. So I was thinking that, I want to refresh my memory myself, and then I could make another YouTube video and try some new sound editing things. And then I can help my friend out and make a video for him as well to kind of go over the basics. So kind of three birds with one stone. Okay, so enough chit-chat. Let's get started and talk about options. So these are kind of the things I want to go over today. So what are options? The strike price and also the underlying share price. Premium is also called the price of the option. Expiry date and some stuff about probability. And the moneyness of the option. So we have kind of 3 different types, and then the intrinsic, extrinsic value, and finally how to calculate option stuff. So this is from Investopedia. So options are a financial derivatives that gives buyers the right, but not the obligation to buy or sell an underlying asset at an agreed upon price and date. So that will make more sense hopefully when I give a simple example coming up soon. So basically you have 2 basic types. So you have call options, and that's the right to buy the underlying asset. And that kind of implies a bullish outlook because you're betting that the underlying asset, say a share, will go up in price. And then you have put options, and that's the right to sell the underlying asset. And that implies a bearish outlook because you're betting that the underlying asset will go down in price. And options can be used, for instance, for hedging. So say that you have a portfolio with S&P 500 stuff, and then you're worried that S&P 500 will go down. So then you can buy, for instance, put options, and they will increase in value as the underlying asset, S&P 500 in this case, will go down. So then you would kind of offset some of that loss on your main portfolio by the gain in the put options. Or they can just be used for speculation, so just like buying and selling the options themselves. And that's kind of what I've been experimenting with myself. So to begin with, let's take a simple example with a Rolex watch. So let's say that Rolex will release a new limited edition watch, and the expected market price will be $10,000. And then you buy a call option with the right, but not the obligation to buy the watch for $10,000. And that expires in 2 months' time, this call option to buy the watch. And for this, you pay $500, and that's basically the same as the option, what we would call the option price or the premium. And the 2 months' time is the same as the expiry date. And the call option obviously gives you the right to buy. So scenario 1, so 1 month after release, the market price of the watch is now $15,000, and your option to buy the watch is now worth $5,000 since it gave you the option. Because you're the holder of the option, so you have the right to buy the watch for $10,000. And if you would sell this option, that gives you a profit of $4,500. So which is the so basically the difference between the 15,000 and 10,000. So the new 5,000 price, and then the 500 initial cost that you paid for the option. So say that you never really wanted to buy the watch, but there's another guy who really wants to buy the watch, and he can use your option to buy the watch. And this basically meant that you were able to capitalize on the watch increasing in value, but without ever purchasing the watch, which is the same as the underlying asset itself. So scenario 2, so say 1 month after the release of the watch, the market price is now 8,000, and your option to buy the watch is now unfortunately worthless, since no one would exercise the option to buy the watch for $10,000 when it can be bought on the market itself for $8,000. So your loss is basically $500, which is what you paid for the watch option. And just as a contrast, if you bought the watch on release for $10,000 and it's now worth $8,000, if you had to sell it, it would now be, your loss would now be $2,000 as opposed to $500 with the option. So this is just kind of an example to, using a Rolex watch, but obviously all this would apply with kind of shares and options on the market as well. So strike price is basically the price that you will buy the shares for, if it's shares that we buy options for, if you would exercise the option at the expiry date. So let's say that the underlying share of company XYZ is 20 and the strike price on your option is 18. Then on the expiry date, you could buy 100 shares of company XYZ for 18, and you would then pay 1,800. So that's kind of the strike price. And the premium is the price that you pay for one option contract. And one option contract basically controls 100 shares of the underlying shares or the underlying asset. And the price quoted in kind of your trading platform is always kind of 100th of what you would pay. So if it says price is 98 cents, that actually means $98. And that's because one option contract controls 100 shares. So it's always, always the price you see multiplied by 100 to get the price that you would actually pay. An expiry date is the date when the option expires, and the options can expire either worthless or in the money. So if the option is in the money at the expiry date, then you can exercise the option, which basically means buying the underlying shares. And if your option is in the money at the expiry date, and there's a certain time as well, I think it's like slightly after market close, that will basically happen automatically. So your option will automatically be exercised, and then you will get the shares, the underlying shares delivered, the 100 underlying shares for one option contract. And basically a longer expiry date, so further out in time, that means that there's kind of a higher probability that something will happen. So if you say that, I think that the underlying shares will increase 20% in value, if you give the option longer, so basically the expiry date is further out in time, then the probability of that happening will actually will be higher, right? Whereas if you give it only a week, then the probability of that happening is less. But also a longer expiry date will be more expensive. So a call option with an expiry date 1 year in the future will be more expensive than a call option with an expiry date 1 week in the future. And you can think about that like insuring something. Like if you would insure something for longer, it would cost you more money. So if you insure a car for 1 week, there's less probability that something bad happens than if you would insure it for 1 year. So in 1 year, there's a higher probability that something bad will happen versus in 1 week, right? So you can kind of think about this, the pricing of the expiry date further out, kind of like insurance pricing. Then we have the moneyness of the option. And we basically have in the money, ITM, at the money, ATM, and out of the money, OTM. So in the money, so if the underlying share price at the time of purchasing the option is 20, and then the option strike price that you choose is 18, then the option is 2 in the money. And that basically means that if you would exercise the option, you would buy 100 shares for 18, and that would be a total outlay of 1800, and then you can sell the shares for 20, so a total of 2000. And the 2 ITM is then reflected in the premium that you would pay for the option when you buy it. So we will go through that in the calculation section. Then just to take a side step, so we have the intrinsic value, and that's basically the option premium is basically combining two things, which is the intrinsic value and the extrinsic value. And the intrinsic value is the moneyness of the option, and this only applies if the option is in the money. So if we have a share price of 20 and the strike price that you picked is 18, then the option is 2 in the money, so then it has an intrinsic value of 2. And then if the share price is 20 and the strike price is 22, and that means that your option is out of money, we will go through that in a bit, then the option is 2 out of the money and the intrinsic value is 0. And then we have the extrinsic value, which is also sometimes known as the time value. And that's basically the value based on the time left on the expiry date. And this goes down every day due to the time decay, because every day that passes until the expiry date, so say that your expiry date is in a week, so you have 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, and so on, then the probability of whatever you thought would happen goes down every day. So every day your option loses extrinsic value. So basically the option premium is the intrinsic value, which only applies if it's in the money. And then we have the extrinsic value, which is the time value. So if we have at the money options, that basically means that if the underlying share price is 20 and the option strike price that you pick is 20 as well, then that's called that the option is at the money. So if you would exercise your option, you would buy, for instance, 100 shares for 20 and total for 2000, and then you can sell the shares for 20, 2000 again. And this is of course implying that nothing has changed between when you bought it and expiry date. So all these examples are like that. So buying at the money options, that's similar to buying the underlying shares, but with the leverage inherent in the options. Because with one options contract, you control 100 shares. And this is kind of versus the X number of shares you would buy if you would just buy the underlying shares instead of using options. And this will all be a bit clearer in the calculation section. So if the option is not, again, so if you buy an at the money option, if it's not in the money on the expiry date, it will again expire worthless. And that's kind of similar to the Rolex example, when the Rolex on the market price was 8,000 and your option, you could buy it for 10,000. And why would anyone do that if they could just buy it for 8,000, right? And then we have out of the money. So if the underlying share price is 20, the option strike price is 22. That means that the option is 2 out of the money. And so that basically means that your option won't have any intrinsic value, because the intrinsic value is only if it's in the money. But it will, when you buy it, it will basically only have extrinsic time value. There might be some kind of other, like, kind of the demand for the option, implied volatility and stuff like that, but that's outside the scope of this kind of introduction video. So yeah, the out of the money option will have some extrinsic value, but that will decay every day with the time decay that I just went through. And buying out of the money options is of course cheaper than in the money or at the money, because, say that the underlying share price is trading for 100 and you say you buy an out of the money option with a strike price of 120, the probability that they will be in the money, so over 120, by the expiry date, especially if the expiry date is quite close in the future, that's very low, that the share price, well, depending on what the share is, of course, but that the share price will go up 20% in value by that exact date. So that's why out of the money options are cheaper than at the money or in the money. So kind of to finish, so how do you calculate option stuff? And in this example, I use slightly funny numbers, but it's just kind of an example that I had, that I did myself a few months ago. So I used that because I kind of had all the numbers. So in both examples, the underlying share price at the time of purchase is 17. So let's first go through the options. So in this case, we bought, or we want to buy like slightly out of the money options. So we choose a strike price of 17.5, which means that they're 0.5 out of the money. So 17 is the underlying share price and our strike price 17.5. And for this, we pay a premium of 1. And remember, it's always times 100. So what we would actually pay is the 100, right? Not 1. And break-even point would be 18.5. And that's because we paid 1 in the premium. That's what we paid to buy the options. So if you add 1 to 17.5 strike price, so our break-even would be 18.5. Which basically means that, you know, if the underlying share price is 17 when we bought the option, if it would rise to 18.5, then our option would be 1 in the money. And then we can sell it for 1. And then we paid 1 for the premium. So then we're at break even. And say that there's like a catalyst coming up for the share that we want to buy. You know, it could be earnings, it could be like whatever. And say that we think that the share in the near future, or you know, within until our expiry date, whether that's 1 week or 1 month or whatever, we think that the share can go to 22. And if it does that before our expiry date, that will basically mean that at our target of 22, we will be in the money of 4.5. So then we take our target 22 minus 17.5, which is our strike price, and then we get 4.5, right? So say that the underlying share goes to 22, our target, and then, okay, great, we want to sell our option. That means that we take 4.5, which is in the money at the target. We take minus 1, and that gives us a profit of 3.5. So basically 350% profit, or 350, because we paid 100 for the option, and we sold it at 4.5, so 450. So 450 minus 350 equals 350, right? So 350% profit on this successful options trade. Then say that we instead of that, we want to buy the underlying shares. Instead of, you know, we don't want to use option, we want to buy the shares, but we want to pay the same amount. So we buy it at 17, and slightly off here, but you know, using whole numbers. So let's say we bought 6 shares and we paid 108 for that. And again, our target is 22. So we sell at 22. So we sold at 22, we paid 17 times 6 shares. So we have 13 profit. And that gives us a profit in percent of 27.78%, right? So kind of same outlay, around 100 for both cases, same target, same price. One is option and one is shares. So with the options, we get 350%, and with the underlying shares, we get 27.78%, right? So what's kind of the difference? Why do the options give us, you know, so much more in profit in this case? And remember that one option contract controls 100 shares, right? So, you know, our strike price was 17.50, which gives us the right but not the obligation to buy the shares at the expiry date for 17.50, and we paid 1 in premium per or 100, because it's always times 100. So what this option, if we say we bought one option, that basically gives us the control of 100 shares, which means that 100 times 750 is 1,750. So then with our target at 22, we sell the 100 shares for 2,200. And that gives us again our 350 percent profit. So so this is again just showing that we sold it for 2,200, and then minus 1,750 that we paid for the 100 shares, and then minus 100, which was our options price, and that's basically showing that it's the same price. So if we would with one option, it would be the same as buying 100 shares on the market. But of course, the difference is that, you know, just buying one option, you paid 100, but to buy the same underlying shares, 100 shares outright, you would have to pay 1,750, right? So with a way less kind of initial outlay of money, you control the 100 shares, and you don't have to pay the 1,750, right? So that's kind of like the magic with option. So kind of to conclude and summarize, so we also have kind of built-in risk management, and to kind of take this example again, so you could buy one option contract for the 100 premium, or you can buy 100 shares for 1,750. So that's basically the same thing, right? The outcome is the same like we saw on these two slides. So one option contract versus buying the 100 shares. The outcome is 350 in both cases. But if you bought the 100 shares outright on the market, you would pay 1,750. So then say the company goes bankrupt, then you're like minus 1,750. But if the company goes bankrupt and you have one option contract, again, all you can lose is the 100, right? So there is kind of like a built-in kind of risk management with option. And then we also have kind of what I just showed. We have inherent leverage since one option contract controls 100 shares. So that's also kind of a feature with option that, you know, with one contract that you can, in this case, buy for 100, you control 100 shares that, you know, are actually worth 1,750. And if you would do that again with the underlying shares directly, you would have to pay 1,750 and not 100. And what's very, very tricky that I understood very quickly when I started playing around with options is that you basically have to get both the strike price and the expiry date right. So, you know, if you pick a strike price that is way too high, and you pick an expiry date that is way too close in the future, then the probability of that strike price getting hit, and by that I mean that the options end up in the money. So, you know, the underlying share price would have to go above the the strike price for the option to be in the money. So if you pick a too high strike price and too short time with the expiry date, then that probability go way down, right? And so that's why it's really important to kind of get both of them right. And that's also very, very difficult to, especially when you're a beginner. And I just kind of started this myself, and I immediately realized how hard it is to get it right. So I think that's kind of what's tricky. And also, you know, if you don't get it right, so if you pick a strike price that is too high, so say that your strike price is 30% above the underlying share price, and you think that that could happen in 2 weeks, and then nothing happens, the share price just goes sideways for 2 weeks, then of course your option will expire worthless. So then you lost whatever you paid, so 100 in this case. Whereas if you buy the underlying shares, you know, then you don't have the expiry date. So, you know, you could just hold the shares for 50 years, and, you know, maybe in some time in the future they will go up in a lot. So that's also a thing with options, that, you know, if you don't kind of get the strike price and the expiry date right, in quotation mark, then the probability that your options will expire worthless can be very high. And whereas if you own the underlying shares, then, you know, you know, in some, you can just kind of hold on to them, and maybe someday they will be worth more than what you paid. So that's kind of a big difference between buying options and underlying shares. But of course, with options, you have the kind of possibility of these kind of huge profits because of the built-in kind of inherent leverage. So in this case, kind of, you know, same money and then 27.8% versus 350%, right? So kind of same outcome, same target, same everything. So that's kind of why it can be a very, very cool thing to play around with. So I think that's it. And I hope that this helps to give it a bit of an introduction to options. Please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and hit that little bell icon too. All engagement helps with the algorithm. Thank you very much. Until next time.